everyone. I'm Dr. Angela Drummond Matthews. Welcome to week 4 of World Literature 1. Last week, you read works of ancient wisdom. This week, we look at the first examples of stories as we know them today. These readings are some of the major influences of the modern novel. We'll be looking at them together with images that represent the themes or ideas in the stories. This week's paper will not be a comparative analysis. Instead, we'll do a visual analysis. You'll read the stories, then choose an image that relates to one of the stories from the examples provided. Read the information about doing a visual analysis. I'll provide you with a template for your thesis statement. Follow the essay example that can be found in the syllabus. Keep in mind that since this is a literature class, you'll be expected to discuss the image in relation to the story, so you still have to read. Speaking of reading, here's this week's readings. First, we'll take a journey through hell with Dante Alighieri's Inferno. Dante Alighieri, better known to the world simply as Dante, was an Italian poet born around 1265 CE. Dante fought in the bitter conflict between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor. He was on the side of the Pope. In 1289 CE, Dante's party won control, but it wasn't long before they began fighting amongst themselves over the role the Pope should have. The factions argued, and in the end, Dante's faction lost and was exiled from Florence. It was during this exile that Dante wrote his famous works. Probably his most famous work is the Divine Comedy, which is where we find Inferno. The comedy follows Dante on a journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven, or Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. Comedy, in this case, doesn't refer to something that's supposed to be funny. Instead, it referred to a philosophy in which the world was planned so that everything would lead to good. And that is what the Divine Comedy does. It starts in hell, and it ends in heaven. While most writers were publishing in Latin, Dante decided to write in Italian, the language of the people. Another cool thing about Inferno is that it reflects a lot of the politics he believed. His enemies often show up in the different circles of hell. Tuesday's reading is 1001 Nights, also known as the Arabian Nights. This work is really a compilation of Middle Eastern folk tales from Asia and North Africa, gathered by many people over the years, starting as early as the 9th century. The story is structured as tales within a tale, also called an embedded narrative. The outer story is of King Shahryar and his habit of killing his wives. His new wife, Scheherazade, gets around this by telling him stories every night that she doesn't finish. The king is so eager to hear the rest of each story that he lets her live another day. Of course, each time she finishes one story, she begins another one, so he has to hear the end of that one too. The idea is that this goes on for 1001 nights. In the end, for many reasons, the king decides not to execute his wife. There are all kinds of stories in 1001 Nights, including some you might have heard, like Aladdin and Sinbad the Sailor. Wednesday's reading is Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. Geoffrey Chaucer was an English poet born around 1340. Like Dante, he wrote his works in his own language, what we call Middle English, instead of Latin, which had been the tradition. 24 stories make up the Canterbury Tales, and they paint a picture of English society and the church. The story is about a group of people taking a pilgrimage from London to Canterbury in order to visit a religious shrine. They agree to relieve their boredom by each telling a story. Whoever tells the best one will get a free dinner. Chaucer chose characters from all walks of life for his stories. We're going to read The Wife of Bath's tale. The Wife of Bath is a woman who is unconventional for her time. Not only has she been remarried, but she openly questions the double standards between men and women. You'll notice that Chaucer spends more time on her prologue than on her story. It's clear he wants readers to pay attention to this social critique. Thursday's reading is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, or Lady Murasaki. Her real name is unknown, but she was a lady-in-waiting at the Japanese imperial court. It's like being a personal assistant. And she wrote what many consider to be the world's first novel around 1000 to 1012 CE. The story is about the life and love affairs of Hikaru Genji, a Japanese emperor's son. The novel is important to us because it gives us a glimpse into the workings of the imperial court during Japan's Heian period, around 784 to 1185 CE. It's also required reading for most students in Japan. Friday's reading comes from one of my favorite novels, Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote, or The Ingenious Gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha. Cervantes was born in Spain around 1547 and published his novel in 1605. He later published a part 2 in 1615. Don Quixote is considered to be the first modern novel. It's about a nobleman who, after reading too many romantic novels, fancies himself to be a brave knight on a mission. He thinks he needs to bring back chivalry and decides to take off on a quest. The problem is that he doesn't really see things for what they are. He thinks he's living in the world of a fantastical heroic tale. His sidekick, Sancho Panza, tries to keep him out of too much trouble, but he can never get Don Quixote to accept reality. We'll be reading the section of the novel in which he strikes out to battle what he thinks are giants, even though Sancho Panza tries to explain to him that they're only windmills. Just to give you an idea of how influential this novel is, the expression tilting at windmills comes from this story. Each of this week's stories has one or more images assigned for you to examine with the literature. I want you to use the story and the information on visual analysis to write an essay in which you analyze the image in connection with the story it represents. You'll look at the design elements in the image, and you'll discuss how those image elements depict the story visually. How do they communicate the themes, plot, or the feel of the story? Just by using images. You should use quotes from the story as well as from secondary sources to accomplish this analysis. That's all for now. Don't forget that you have the opportunity to discuss these stories and the essay with me in the optional class discussion at noon on Friday. I can't wait to read and listen to your discussions of these works this week. Like I said before, these are some of my favorites. Have a great week. Bye-bye.